Welcome to Yahoo Finance. I'm Kristen Myers, and this is 2020, a time for change. We are in the full swing of election season, so let's talk voting. And sorry for anyone who can hear my dog in the background. Excited about today's episode. We are joined now by Alexandra Harris. She's the executive director of the Andrew Goodman Foundation, a nonprofit aimed at increasing minority and youth voter participation. As always, Jen Rogers and Sibyl Marcellus are here for today's conversation. Alex, thank you so much for joining us today. I don't think too many people know, but your organization was founded in the civil rights era, named after Andy Goodman, an activist who traveled to Mississippi to help Blacks register to vote. His murder by the KKK, of course, was then memorialized in the film Mississippi Burning. Wondering for you, today, now in 2020, President Trump's campaign is mobilizing poll watchers, which for many bring to mind that dark history of voter intimidation. It was rampant for decades until a decree, a 1982 decree, prevented Republicans from using voter suppression tactics. That is, of course, until that decree recently expired. Wondering, as we are now less than a month away from elections, if you think that dark history of voter intimidation could be repeated again in this election.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is such an incredible time for our country. And so being here and having a chance to speak to your audience about voting is really important to me. And your question is really important. I can't predict the future. I have no idea what's going to happen, but if history is any indication and what we've seen over the primaries and all the elections before, I anticipate that voters should be prepared to walk boldly into their precinct if they intend to vote in person, and to also prepare to vote by mail in the most effective way that they can. We're telling people that if they intend to vote by mail, that they should absolutely follow up and make sure that their ballot was received. But anybody who feels comfortable going to Whole Foods, we encourage them to vote in person and to vote early. So if you can go get your groceries, then you can probably vote in person. But as far as voter suppression, we're going to experience a lot for sure.
Well, over the last 2 decades, we've seen elections that are historic for a variety of reasons. The 2020 election, as many are discussing, is going to be no exception. I myself, and I know a lot of my friends, we're all operating in this echo chamber where it seems, at least on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, that everyone is getting mobilized. All my Black friends are registering their family members to vote. My Black relatives are all out there getting ready to vote. I feel as if I am in a moment where voter turnout could be historic, but I know that the echo chamber isn't necessarily reality. And this is something that you're dealing with on the ground, trying to get not just minorities to vote, but also younger people to vote. These are 2 groups that historically have low voter turnout. I'm wondering what the reality of this situation is, or is that echo chamber that I'm currently in, is that actually a reflection of what you are seeing on the ground?
Yes, we are seeing that. Students are fired up. They're ready to go out and vote. We're hearing just a groundswell of excitement about voting. Certainly people are upset about what's happening with COVID, what's happening with the movement in general. And so people are kind of toiling between, do I go to the streets or do I vote? And we're telling people yes and.
Now, Alexandra, I wanted to ask you about young voters. Do you think that they're motivated enough to go out to the polls? Because historically speaking, it's older voters that tend to show up. Younger voters talk about voting and excitement, but they don't necessarily show up in as many numbers as that. So do you think that what we've seen so far in the election and the debates, there's been enough talk of issues that actually impact young Americans? For example, the forgiveness of student loans or some kind of financial relief in that sense?
I think so. We've seen between 2014 and 2018, the largest growth in the voter population has been among young people. So certainly young people do care. And all of these issues, climate, mass incarceration, race, equity, those are all things that young people care a lot about. And so they've heard enough. They're ready to do their part, I believe. And certainly the Andrew Goodman ambassadors are ready to go.
So a lot of those ambassadors are on college campuses. Why are college campuses a place where we're seeing so much voter suppression right now? And I guess, I mean, do you, in fact, you're working on the ground, are we seeing more this election cycle, and why the focus there?
I think and that's a great question. One of the things that, the fact that there's been such a doubling of the number of young people going to vote makes young people a big target for suppression. And some of our college campuses are broken into multiple voting precincts. So the gerrymandering that we're seeing in communities of color is just magnified on college campuses. So it makes it incredibly confusing. Where do I vote? How do I vote? Can I vote? And then, of course, just couple that with COVID and the fact that so many students have been displaced. So there's a real question of where they should vote. If they're initially on campus and that's where they're registered, but then they're forced out of state, that of course affects how they're going to vote. So all of these complications are only magnified if you're a student.
All right, well, we will leave that there. Alexandria Harris, thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly important conversation. Alexandria Harris, Executive Director of the Andrew Goodman Foundation.
Thank you.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and up next, we'll be chatting with Mississippi Congressman Bennie Thompson.
Welcome back to 2020, A Time for Change. I'm Sabeel Marcellus. President Trump's positive coronavirus diagnosis has upended the presidential race. Trump has pushed for lawmakers to pass standalone stimulus bills that would put stimulus checks directly into the pockets of Americans and save thousands of jobs in the U.S. airline industry. But he's been met with skepticism about his mental health as he undergoes treatment. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, arguably the most important person at the stimulus negotiation table, aside from President Trump, has questioned whether or not President Trump is suffering from the side effects of his coronavirus medical treatment. Joining us now is Congressman Bennie Thompson of Mississippi. Now, Congressman, millions of Americans are facing financial devastation as we're dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. Now, Black workers are among the hardest hit. You're born in a state with a unique history of racial inequality. Iconic civil rights leaders marched there. Given the financial devastation that millions of Americans are facing, why would Democrats not just take President Trump on his offer and offer stimulus checks to Americans as quickly as possible? Why should the election get in the way of a person's ability to pay rent and put food on the table?
Well, thank you very much for having me. But as you know, we've been wrestling with an additional payment for over 5 weeks now. The president has basically been back and forth with this process. He's taken Mnuchin out of action. He put Meadows in, he put Mnuchin back in. And so what we're saying as a House of Representatives, all we want to do is get a package done. We don't want a piecemeal package. Sure, the stimulus is important. The unemployment checks are important also. The monies for the airlines is important. Everything we put in the package is important. What we don't want is the president starting pitting one group against the other. And that's what he's noted for. So I'm committed to supporting the package. I've supported CARES 1, CARES 2, the HEROES package, and now the 2.2 stimulus package we passed last week. It's on the table. All the president needs to do is step up and be the adult in the room for once in his life and do the right thing.
But what about the acknowledgement of the fact that millions of Americans are suffering right now? Would a standalone bill in terms of stimulus checks not help?
Well, it would help. But look, in my district, which is one of the poor districts in America, the people know about struggle. This is nothing new. They know about Donald Trump. They know about the food baskets he passed out last week with a letter in them saying he's caring about them. But when you look at his package, there's nothing in there. And in the Black community, he had a watermelon in the ones in my district. That's an insult to a lot of Black people. But more importantly, when you look at the SNAP program, when you look at the free and reduced meals programs for children, he's cut those programs. So clearly, this man is doing all this for the politics. I'm convinced that the people in my district who are having a difficult time, they'll make it. But I know one thing, they're absolutely committed on November 3rd to go to the polls and vote Donald Trump out.
Let's talk about the election. We just had on somebody from the Andrew Goodman Foundation who they've been working on voter suppression and getting out the vote. I want to know what you're hearing on the ground there. I think right after the debate and when the president made his comments about the Proud Boys, there was a lot of concern that there was going to be confrontation, like at the polls. Do you feel that that has died down, or are you still worried that we could have incidents at the polls, between voters and Americans?
Well, there's no question about it. The potential exists. We had a hearing 2 weeks ago on the Homeland Security Committee where the FBI director testified that right-wing extremism was on the rise in America. You saw what just recently happened today in Michigan with the arrest of some right-wing extremists there who want to take the governor out. So the potential is there. So what we have to do is fight those kinds of extremist activities with every fiber in our body. Just because you're online saying you're big and bad, most of those people don't leave the cyberspace because they're not real adults. We are prepared from our standpoint as Democrats, as Americans, that if those individuals show up harassing voters, I'm convinced that the election officials and the authorities are prepared to deal with them. Nobody is afraid of Donald Trump and his tweet storms. We will make sure that in America, Americans decide who their leaders are at the ballot box. You can't do it on Twitter. I'm sorry, Mr. President. You're gonna have to get out the White House, go meet the people when you are, what should I say? When it's safe for you to come out, because right now you have a problem, and I think that problem is causing you to make a lot of mistakes. So I hope he gets well, but I don't want him out of the White House before the doctors say he's well. But beyond that, in America, we sell our differences at the ballot box. My area is an intimidation area historically, but I can tell you the excitement is there. I'm having a call later on today with all the presidents of the student government here in the state of Mississippi, getting them riled up, make sure that they go to the polls and vote. What we've done in terms of our homework, every historically Black college in the state of Mississippi is also a voting precinct. So we have taken all of the resistance in terms of transporting people 8 and 10 miles away. We put those voting precincts right on the campus. And if you know, we put them in the student union. Sooner or later, every college student matriculates through the student union on a daily basis. So we're excited about that. We see the fraternities, the sororities, other organizations, athletes on campus. They are moving forward in anticipation of a robust turnout also.
And Congressman, real quick, as chairman of the House Committee on Homeland Security, what do you see as the biggest threat to our country as Election Day approaches? Is it foreign meddling, or is it actual reports of absentee ballot mishaps?
Well, we have two fronts. One, the Russians are absolutely trying to create misinformation out here online to help Donald Trump. That's documented. The FBI director testified before our committee that that's what the Russians were doing. On the other hand, he said the right-wing extremists are also trying to adversely impact the election. So all of us are prepared to address it. It's not the left-wing extremists, so to speak. They really want the process to work. It's the right-wingers who don't want the left-wingers to vote. And that's not the American way. So we're going to make sure that regardless of persuasion, if you want to vote, you will have an unfettered opportunity to do that. We are prepared to do it. Derek Johnson with the NAACP, we've had a conversation. They are prepared to have poll watchers to help. ACLU is prepared, and a number of other activist organizations are also just making sure that people come, vote for the candidates of their choice, and then go home.
Well, we'll definitely keep a close eye on efforts there as Election Day approaches. Congressman Bennie Thompson, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, filmmaker and director Ava DuVernay is highlighting the work of young leaders in their communities. She joins us next to talk about her latest work.
Welcome back to 2020, A Time for Change. From Selma to 13th to When They See Us, Ava DuVernay has helped steer the national conversation around race with her work. She's championing a new project, which will be released this Sunday for the UN's International Day of the Girl. It's 10 VR films on how girls are using technology around the world. It's called New Realities. And when I interviewed her earlier, I began by asking why this project, given everything that's happening right now.
I thought it was beautiful. And I thought the idea was beautiful. A Black woman-led narrative change collective, Array, my group, partnering with the technology company, partnering with the UN initiative, all of us thinking about how do we empower empathy? How do we actually not just talk about empathy, make it active? And the idea of wanting to give girls from around the world, young women from around the world, the opportunity to tell stories about what they cared about, where they were, and not just straight to camera, that literally you could look at their environment with this 360 immersive technology was a win-win-win when the idea was presented to me. And I was like, I want to be a part of it. But then the satisfying thing is to see it come to life and to see the girls where they were. And right now, you know, what you call it, doom scrolling? I love that. I'm going to use that.
I stole it.
Okay, I'm going to steal it too. Literally, you need to break that up. There's a constant cacophony of a certain kind of voice that's just overpowering us. There are things that we need to talk about, and those are the nuanced things, reminding ourselves of the things that matter. And these young people matter. Where they are matter, what they think about, what they care about matters. And so to see them tell their own stories in such a cool way, I think it's the perfect time for it.
So one of the women into that point is Marianne from Mexico. And she said, I think the first step to change the world is to know it. But right now, I mean, given the current climate in the world, like there's a lot of people that you don't want to know what's going on. How do we continue to amplify these important voices that, you know, these are beautiful, you know, pieces, but to continue to do that in this environment where people are constantly either feeling under threat or put down, or that they can't be heard. No one's going to listen.
Well, that's one of the tactics of division, confusion, and to make us feel more distant from each other. And we have to be sober enough and know that that's happening and fight against it. You know, it's easier just to log off. It's easier just to not watch. It's easier not to ask the next question. All that's easier. And a lot of people are counting on that to happen. And the more that happens, the more separated we become. There are a lot of forces out there trying to keep us disconnected. And so this whole project is really about empathy. You know, to change the world, you got to know it, you know, I could put that on a t-shirt. You know what I mean? Like, and I believe people would buy it because I think our natural instinct is to be together. And so we just need to find the ways to do that. And this is our offering.
So in New Realities, the girls and young women leverage technology in different ways. And it's funny, I have a 13-year-old daughter, so she's younger than most of these people. But when I think of technology and girls right now, I am thinking about TikTok, okay? It is a less traditional way of making an impact, but stick with me. I'm curious if you think that it is an avenue for real change, and especially for girls in particular. You look at, you know, what TikTok teens did over the summer with the Tulsa rally. You could look at Claudia Conway right now. She's got 1.3 million followers. So is that a way for girls to be part of the conversation and use technology as well?
Sure. I mean, it's expression, and it's actually these are all little films. I mean, I'm a filmmaker, so I see everything through the lens of film. But people are making films. You know, these are films. These are little. They're clips, but people are choreographing. You know, designing, costume, music. Like these are the elements, the tools, the very basic tools of expression through image. And I think it's fantastic. And then you add the technology to it and the fact that you can press a button and broadcast that to the world. I mean, we've been dealing with and working with this technology for a while, the way that you can record yourself and broadcast right away. But something about TikTok and the way that it's galvanized young people's imagination. It's not just documenting. There's imagination that's going into it as well. I think it's very exciting, very necessary. And something that we all need to be watching closely.
Before we go, can I ask you one question about 13th?
Sure.
Because I rewatched it this summer, of course, and I saw it when it came out, and it was one of the most watched films on Netflix this summer. And what do you make of that? Just following George Floyd's murder, that it became such a touchstone.
You know, I'm proud that people embraced 13th over this summer of racial reckoning. And the thing that I hope doesn't happen is that people watch that film and feel like, got it, understand. You know, the film was designed and directed in a manner that it is a primer. It is a first touch point. It is an opening, a door opening to a whole history. And that I hope people become more curious about. You can't watch the film and just feel deeply and then keep moving. We have to keep learning about each other. We have to remain empathetic. And that only comes through continuing to learn. That was a 100-minute film, right? You spent 100 minutes learning about things that you may not have known about. And the question is, will you invest more time in those things that you say you care about? So that's my hope with 13th. And we've seen that a lot of people are. And so the hope is that that education of empathy just continues.
And part of that education of empathy is in New Realities. Those films launch this Sunday, and you can watch them with the International Girl Day. Kristen, back to you.
Well, thank you so much, Jen. That was a really interesting interview and conversation. I'm looking forward to watching some of the rest of that project. Well, that is our show for now. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to join us next week for our next episode of 2020, A Time for Change.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.